So the first speaker up is Nancy Healey, a good friend of ours from Employment Social Development Canada in the acronym list, that's CSDC. And come on up, Nancy.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here with you. So, moving right along, so the Commission for the Canada Employment Insurance Commission, as I mentioned, I'm an independent voice for employers. I'm there to be your advocate, to take what your issues and concerns are and try to navigate that through the labyrinth of ESDC, which is one of the largest departments in government. And quite a variety of issues that I deal with, and sometimes you wouldn't think that how government decides what's in a knock code is important. It's not always the sexiest things in the world. So I'm to be that voice for, as I mentioned, for employers. So just to give you a little bit of background on EI. So as you all know, employers and workers pay into the Canada Employment Insurance System. Employers pay 58% of the premiums, workers pay 42%. I'd like to say I should get 58% of the votes, but I don't. I get a third of the votes, so it can be a challenge sometimes to advance the agenda of employers, but not everything is done at the commission level. A lot of things are done at explaining to officials how things should work. EI in a normal year is about $25 billion that is expended on that. The vast majority goes out in EI regular benefits, but there are also monies now. We have a program, they're the maternity benefits, which have recently expanded to include adoptive parents who can get an extra 15 weeks of leave. There's caregiver benefits, there's sickness benefits, and the sickness benefits, I'll just point out to you, there used to be, people would be eligible for 15 weeks of sickness benefits. Although the average was 10, government has increased that to 26 weeks. And as you know, there are a lot of provinces now that have 5 paid sick days. The actuary who does the projections, so the actuary, when we had it at 15 weeks and the average number of weeks people took was 10, there was cost about $200 million a year. In 1 year, the actuary anticipates that will increase 5 times to over $1 billion in use of sickness benefits. And on top of that, you do not have to submit a doctor's note to get a medical claim. And because there's been a lot of concern expressed by the medical community about the extra burden on physicians to write these notes and all. So this is one of the things, the integrity measures and ensuring that we do things properly and have integrity in the system is one of the things that I try to monitor. So this year, EI premiums increased yet again. They were frozen during the pandemic. And so the EI premium is $1.66, but as I noted, employers pay 1.4 times, so employers pay $2.32. So the maximum that an employee will pay, if they're making $63,200, is $1,049, and the maximum an employer will pay into the system was $1,468. The reason why there was an increase in the premium is to pay down the debt that accumulated during the pandemic. There was no other reason why EI premiums went up. There's actually a briefing note that was leaked that showed that this was the only reason why EI premiums had to go up, despite a lot of the efforts we put into trying to encourage the government to do as they did in the first year of the pandemic, because these were extraordinary measures, changes to EI and the introduction of CERB. I didn't think that it should be put on workers and employers to pay down the debt, because EI was made available to millions of people who otherwise would not have been eligible. They could get it for 50 weeks. They would get $500 a week. And, you know, they only had, at one point, only had to show they had 120 hours. These changes, which cost in the billions of dollars, up like 60 billion, and I pointed out to you the program's only worth about 25 billion. Those changes are the exact changes that organized labor were strongly advocating for during the discussions on EI reform. So thankfully, due to the strong voice from the employer community, but also I think, and it was as the Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, who eventually put a stop to reforming EI because of the sheer cost that it would be. I mean, it was one change, like to be 420 hours before you become eligible for EI was going to cost about 10 billion. So this program's only worth 25 billion. So 10 billion, is a third of the cost of the program. So here's a little bit of labor market information. We move on to the next slide. All right, so these are the unemployment rates across the country. And, we're seeing a slight increase in unemployment, but still it is at, really low records. And the Canadian economy and the job creation has been absolutely astronomical. I don't know if you saw the jobs report out of the U.S. last week. In the month of January, I think the U.S. economy created 335,000 jobs. That's huge, and we would anticipate that Canada is going to do the same. So, even though we've seen some softening in job vacancies, and I'll have some further data on that. Unemployment still remains, in a very good position in this country. We are bringing in more people into the country, and I'll show you some numbers a little later on as why we need to do that. And our ability to absorb hasn't been as fast, but we still need all these people because we have so many people set to retire and so few people, so few younger people in this country. So this here shows the employment and participation rate and unemployment rates for each of the provinces to December. So the participation rates are the number of people who are eligible to work between 50 and they go beyond 65 because lots of people, and I think we need to actually, that's one of the biggest segments of the population that we have able to work are the people between 55 and 65 who've decided to retire. But so Canada has an employment rate of 61%, a participation rate of 65%, and you can see the unemployment rate for each of the provinces there. The next slide talks about the average hourly wage, and I like to share this with people because there's oftentimes accusations that employers are not keeping up with increases in paying workers, and traditionally we'd see a 2% increase annually in wages. You know yourself how much you've increased wages. These are astronomical amounts year over year. 5.4% overall. In British Columbia, almost a 7% increase year over year from December 22 to December 2023. So, we did have, I guess, hyperinflation for a while, but employers are trying to keep up. Labor is one of your highest, largest expenditures, and these are huge increases that we're seeing in average hourly earnings. Our next slide, did I do that right? Is on job vacancies, and I want to delve into this a little bit because there's some interesting numbers behind the scenes on this. So yeah, job vacancies have gone down from about 1 million job vacancies to 633,000 in Canada. CFIB just recently came out with a report. CFIB does a survey of their employers on a monthly basis, all private sector employers. And they have a statistic about small businesses, and we know small businesses, less than 50 employees, even micro businesses, 1 to 4, 1 to 10. The vast majority of businesses in Canada are in that small category, 1 to 10, 1 to 20 employees. In the micro category, 1 to 4, they have a job vacancy rate of 7%. The next, when we go from 5 to 10, the job vacancy rate is at 6%, and when we go above that, it's 5%. Because small businesses don't have a HR department. They probably had employees who were long-standing, loyal employees who have subsequently retired, who did a bit of everything. And so, what exactly do you put into that job description? So, I'm very much concerned about the challenges that small employers are having and the job vacancies that are there. I want to delve into a little bit further on job vacancies. Where do I point it at you? Okay, here it is. So the job vacancy rate decreased in all industries with the exception of healthcare and social assistance. But you can still see, the areas that are leading: accommodation and food, health, of course, construction, business admin support, resources with respect to agriculture. So, we are still seeing job vacancies. I mean, 663,000 job vacancies is still a large number. My next slide talks about business views, about where they see labor shortages, and a smaller proportion are reporting labor shortages compared to a year ago. But I thought I had the next slide up that I was going to go to. So again, I do acknowledge that it's softening, but I do think there's an acute challenge that we have, and that is in jobs that require are low skilled or semi-skilled. We can go to the next one. So data suggests that most vacancies in occupations related to natural resources, agriculture, manufacturing, utilities, and sales and service require a low level of education, high school or less. In comparison, most vacancies in occupations related to natural science, health, and education required a post-secondary. So you can see natural resources and agriculture, which are, I assume, where the landscape horticultural sector would fall in. The vast majority of job vacancies are in require high school or less. And I have a concern about this because, I have my next chart talks about the number of 15 to 24-year-olds, and you can see the decline. That's since 1990, the number of 15 years old and over. The red line is 15 to 24, and how much it's declined over the last 30 years, 40 years, 90, 20, 30 years. And so, it just came out last week, Canada has the lowest fertility rate that it's ever had at 1.3%. So there are not enough young people who normally are your low skilled, who are going to school or whatever, to be able to take positions. Hence why we need to rely on international students and immigration to bring people in. Yet our immigration system is highly skewed towards those that, you get more points the more education that we have. I'm a believer that it takes a village of people of all skill levels to run an economy, and I think we need to revisit how we do immigration. We bring a lot of people in through the temporary foreign worker program, not as many as some people might like to suggest. In the non-ag sector, 40% of temporary foreign workers become permanent residents because it's the only path that we have to bring people in. And my next slide, it talks about labor market tightness. So this is the degree of tightness has eased, but what I fear is that we're going to see tightening of immigration. We're already seeing that with the number of international students that are going to be coming in. I don't anticipate that our unemployment rate is going to go that much higher. I still think there's going to be demand. There's still more people set to retire, and you probably know the statistics, and our next speaker from Ag knows the number of more people set to retire than enter the labor force, and that is, across so many sectors. So I don't anticipate that, if we should go into a recession, which, we actually might kind of be in one because we're at 0.1 or 0.2% in growth, but we have not seen any decline in job creation. We're still creating jobs, which is good. Economists have never lived through this before, so it makes for interesting discussions and debates. So this I thought you may find interesting. Basically every year now, the ESDC does the Canadian Occupational Projections. And this, they look at a knock code, I think it's 500 knock codes that they look at, and they try to determine whether or not this occupation is in surplus, balance, or shortage. So I took two occupations, nursery and greenhouse workers, and my other one is landscape and horticultural technician. So I'll go over nursery and greenhouse workers. So this occupation, there is going to be a shortage. That's one of 50 occupations that have been deemed there's going to be a shortage. Of the 500 knock codes, only 50 are deemed to be in shortage. So what they look at is the number of retirements that they're going to be, the replacement demand, the number of school leavers that will be able to come into the program, the number of immigrants that will come along. And so the projected job openings are expected to be 7,600, and the projected job seekers are expected to be 8,400. That doesn't sound like it would be in balance. That sounds reverse to me. So the reason why I bring this up, and I'll show you the next one too, because keep them both in context. So this other one is the knock code 2225, landscape and horticultural technician. This is deemed to be balanced. I wonder if I copied the right one because the numbers seem to be the same to me. So this sector is deemed to be balanced, and that means that there's going to be enough people to replace than there are going to leave. I've often asked, and I'm looking at Victor now, have you been consulted by Government of Canada with respect to these projections? What do you mean by consulted?
That's not working. One of the challenges we have is that a lot of the data comes from the job bank or things that we post. Hello. So because our profession industry doesn't post a lot on job bank, the data is never captured. Mm-hmm. So in consultation, we always state, and we've had several meetings with ESDC last year, that we do have a shortage, and that's why we offered ourselves to run several pilots under a variety of programs, and we were turned down on several because we are not showing to have a labor shortage.
Exactly.
And so when we do, post your jobs, everyone. Click and subscribe.
That helps, yeah.
So because of that, we are always fighting that battle. And when we try to bring even foreign workers and have to do a labor market impact assessment, it also shows that we don't have a shortage. So it has to be proven by every single employer in their jurisdiction that they actually, in fact, have a shortage.
Yeah. So the methodology behind how this COPS projection is done, I have grave concerns about. I'm not a statistician or researcher, but I do have some, this is done at an aggregate national level. It doesn't have the granularity that it needs to have. So I do have, gathering from some other employer groups, and going to the department. They made a presentation to my national BLG meeting in November, I think it was. I think there was going to be a riot. People were quite upset about it because, I said there's 500 occupations, only 50 are deemed to be in shortage. Think like cooks. Cooks has been the #1 occupation that we've recruited for in Canada for 20 years, and that one's going to be in balance. So, it really makes you wonder about how they do this data. So, these are examples of some of the more mundane things, but important things, because these occupational projections do determine temporary foreign workers, whether or not you're eligible for funding, where priorities are placed. So they say that it's only one indicator, but I see it more and more being used as being the final decision making on whether where funding will go, or where what immigration levels will be, or what categories will encourage. So my next slide, so one of the things, and I thank Leslie for being part of the committee that we had on this. I was quite concerned about, the negative press and the myths that are out there about the temporary foreign worker program. And so I established a committee of employer groups, and our purpose was to help demystify and get some of the facts out there. In addition, we met with the UN Special Rapporteur, who in the fall of last year, after a brief visit to Canada, issued a preliminary report and called Canada's temporary foreign worker program akin to modern-day slavery. And I thank Leslie for giving us the exact quote of what he said, because he disputed that in our meeting. And it was you, Leslie, that said, this is the quote from your report. So where you actually said that. So anyway, we were very polite, and I'm very optimistic that his final report will be a bit more balanced and will include some of the information that we share with them. So just to share with you, so the Canadian labor force is about 20 million people, and the number of temporary foreign workers here in Canada is 200,000. Yes, it has doubled. It was 100,000, and now it is 200,000. 70,000 of those come in the seasonal agricultural worker program, which has been around for 50 years, and we have agreements with 11, 12 sovereign states, memorandums of understanding, and countries like Jamaica and Mexico and Guatemala help us bringing people from their country into Canada. People have been coming back for 20 and 30 years. Some of you may use the program, be quite familiar with it. Why would countries sign agreements and continue to send workers to Canada if they thought they were being mistreated? Since 2022, there are a whole bunch of new regulations that were brought in, and compliance and integrity measures. And I can tell you that 97% of employers are compliant. Those that were not compliant, the vast majority, were not compliant because they didn't file paperwork on time or other administrative matters. We are all firm believers that anybody who is mistreating their employees should not be part of this program, and we'd like to get rid of these bad apples. We don't want more rules and regulations put upon employers, the vast majority of whom are treating their workers well. One of the things we have done is prepare a bunch of resources. This is an example of one of them. This is an infographic which talks about the temporary foreign worker program. We also have briefing notes, FAQs, frequently asked questions, some talking points, and so we encourage people to, that's moving ahead on me. We encourage groups to share these resources out with their employer community, to put them in their newsletters, and we need to continue to get the good news out about this program and how important that it is. Last thing I just want to mention on this particular topic is I believe that there's a movement afoot to, one of the things that UN Special Rapporteurs recommended, one thing that a couple of parliamentary committees have recommended, and what labor unions continue to advocate for is the elimination of employer-specific work permits or closed work permits, and that open work permits would be the solution to the temporary foreign worker challenges that Canada's facing. Reading the tea leaves and looking at the comments that the immigration minister has made and others, I do believe that there is a strong thinking that a move from employer-specific work permits to open work permits, it may be in the cards, and that if you have concerns about that, I think the closed or employer-specific work permits have a lot of protections for the temporary foreign worker. The employer has been vetted. You know where that worker is. There are all kinds of mechanisms for that worker to move employers if they are claim to be abused. So I want, we can probably have a discussion with everybody afterwards on this topic, but I just want to alert that I do anticipate a public policy change moving away. They've talked about sectoral or regional work permits, so still having closed permits, but you could move within a sector or you could move within a region. I'm still not quite confident how that would work. For instance, in the restaurant sector, you're brought in as a cook, the restaurant next door offers you $1 more an hour, you're still in the same sector. So and the your initial employer went through the LMIA, flew you over, and had all those costs. So I also want to talk a little bit about international students, and I'll show you a chart afterwards. So just in so the international students who are here in Canada right now can continue to work 40 hours a week until April 30th, 2024, and that's when most of their student visas will expire. And as you know, there's been some further measures put in place to limit the number of international students who come to Canada by the amount of money that they have to demonstrate that they have available to them, a doubling from 10,000 to 20,000. I do anticipate, and you saw those numbers of the 15 to 24-year-olds who, declined in Canada because we didn't birth any, and the only little uptick that we've had is in the last few years, and that is a result of the international students that have come here in that category. I think, I also anticipate that they may revert to the 20 hours, or they may consider a 30-hour limit for the number of hours that international students can work going forward. If you have concerns about that, again, I'd like to hear and make representations on your behalf. Just to give you a sense of the international student community and where the students are. So there's about 801,000 international students, 807,000, sorry, in Canada. 411,000, almost 412,000 are in Ontario. 164,000, almost 165,000 are in British Columbia. Quebec has 93,000, Alberta 43, Manitoba 22,000, Nova Scotia 20,000, and it goes down from there. And the top 5 source countries are India, 319,000, China 100,000, the Philippines 32,000, France 27,000, and Nigeria 21,645. And that number, as you probably have heard in the news, has certainly increased over the last 5 years, in particular, the number of international students that are in Canada. Again, I think they're replacing the 15 to 24-year-olds that we don't have. We'd love for them all to stay, yet we put restrictions on that as well. So my next slide is about labor market development agreements, and I'm going to bring this to your attention. So, I talked about the monies in the EI account, and the vast majority of that goes out in payments to people who want to draw EI, whether or not from a layoff or because of a caregiver sickness or maternity, paternity benefits. But there's another close to $2.5 billion that goes out to the provinces through labor market development agreements, and this is the monies that go to Jobs and Skills Ontario or other labor programs throughout the country. And the purpose is to help individuals who have lost their job get job finding skills, go back to school and upgrade their education. The amount of money that's going, since 2017, there's been a top-up in the amount of money that's been going to the provinces. The top-up has amounted to close to $1.8 billion since 2017. And that money is set to expire. And I'm very concerned. I don't think this is the time to cut the amount of money that's going to help individuals who may have lost their jobs. The disruptions in employability are coming because of technology, AI, because of climate change and sustainability needs. There's also been an uptick. One of the things that the federal government has required the provinces to do since the pandemic It's called TRF, Targeted Referral Program. It's a contact, so every month, each province is given a list of who just recently received EI. It's almost like a workers' comp thing, where the employer has to contact the worker who's been injured. How are you doing? When can you come back? So they're contacting people and saying, hey, I heard you lost your job. Would you like to come in and get resume building skills or whatever? There has been a 50% increase in the number of people who are using those programs, which is great, because we're going right after people and trying to help them right away. I'm at the 1 minute or well beyond that, aren't I? So that money is about to, the top-up is about to expire. I don't think this is a good time for the top-up to expire. I encourage you to contact your provincial and federal representatives to advocate that this, because this is EI money, this is not tax dollars, and there's lots of money in that EI account. If we weren't paying down that debt, we'd have lots of money. So I'll end it there, happy to take questions from people afterwards, or